Today's analysis, everyone. We are diving headfirst into an incredibly thrilling chapter of history today. Seriously, this is an absolute masterclass in both military strategy and, surprisingly enough, incredible magnanimity. We're talking about the legendary Sultan Saladin, the man who literally shook the Crusader world to its core. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly does an invincible European Crusader army just fall apart in a single day? I mean, for centuries, this heavy cavalry was the undisputed pride of Europe. They were heavily armored, highly trained, and basically unstoppable, right? Yet they were wiped out in the blink of an eye out there in the scorching desert sands. To figure out how a catastrophic defeat like that even happens, we've got to look at the sheer tactical genius of one man, Saladin. Section 1. Rise against the Crusaders.
88. For a staggering 88 years, Jerusalem sat firmly under the unyielding control of Christian crusaders. And during this massive chunk of time, the Muslim world was, frankly, a bit of a mess. It was deeply fragmented, completely split by internal rivalries and political weakness. Because of all this division, mounting any sort of real challenge to European dominance seemed mathematically and politically impossible. But, this exactly fractured landscape? That's where Saladin performed his very first great miracle. His ultimate goal, right from the start, was to reclaim the holy city of Jerusalem. But Saladin, he wasn't just some dreamer with his head in the clouds. He was a ruthless pragmatist. He knew perfectly well that throwing a divided, disorganized force against a massive, heavily armored European army was just, it was a suicide mission. So he did something entirely groundbreaking. Through years of intense diplomacy, strategic skirmishes, and just sheer force of will, he managed to bind the fragmented Muslim world together under a single banner. He gave them one singular, unwavering vision, completely transforming a fractured region into an absolute military powerhouse. Section 2. The Military Trap of Hattin. So the stage is finally set in early 1187 as Saladin readies his newly unified forces. And he doesn't just want a battle. Okay, he wants a totally decisive victory, and he wants it strictly on his own terms. By early July, he orchestrates this brilliant psychological move. He deliberately provokes the Crusaders, attacking a nearby outpost specifically to lure their massive army out of their safe, well-watered strongholds. And guess what? The bait works perfectly. Then comes July 4th. The two massive armies finally clash, but not on your standard open green battlefield. No. They meet in the suffocating, relentless heat of the desert, which is exactly where Saladin wanted them. And this brilliantly illustrates just how Saladin's military mind was operating on a completely different level here. First up, he lures this heavily armored enemy way, way out of their comfort zone and into the sweltering desert. Imagine being wrapped in heavy steel chainmail out there. It became a literal oven for them. Next, and this was really the killing blow, he completely severed their vital water supply lines. He even went as far as setting the dry desert scrub bush on fire just to blow thick smoke right into the Crusader camp. Finally, he ambushes the exhausted, severely dehydrated knights. So this wasn't just standard sword-to-sword combat. He was actually weaponizing the raw forces of nature itself to completely break the enemy's spirit before a single sword was even swung. Section 3. Fall of Europe's Best Knights. The result of this totally flawless trap was just unimaginable. In a single day, the so-called invincible Crusader forces were utterly annihilated. We're talking about Europe's absolutely finest knights, men who had trained their entire lives for heavy shock combat, meeting their end in the sand, quite literally unable to even lift their weapons because they were so exhausted. Top Crusader leaders were captured right there on the spot, including King Guy of Jerusalem and the notoriously brutal Reynald of Chatillon. A total military collapse of this sheer magnitude, it was practically unheard of in medieval history, and it completely shifted the balance of power in just a matter of hours. Section 4. Reclaiming Jerusalem. So, with the main European resistance completely shattered at Hattin, the path forward was wide open. I really want you to try to feel the sheer historical weight of this moment. After nearly 9 decades, 88 years of being the epicenter of a completely different empire and culture, control of the city actually shifted back. The Holy City was successfully reclaimed by Saladin, definitively achieving the very vision he had used to unite his people in the first place. Section 5. A rare example of mercy. Now, what's really interesting to consider right here is how this moment completely subverts what we've come to expect from medieval warfare. Normally, a medieval conquest meant one specific thing: a brutal bloodbath, mass looting, and fierce, unchecked revenge. Actually, history had seen exactly that happen to Jerusalem nearly a century prior when the Crusaders first took it. The stage was perfectly set for a massive, bloody retaliation. But as a victorious general holding the power of ultimate revenge right in the palm of his hands, Saladin did the exact opposite. He chose mercy. He secured the entire city without a merciless massacre. He allowed citizens to ransom themselves, and get this, he even paid for the freedom of many out of his own pocket. It was a profound, completely unprecedented display of humanity that absolutely stunned both his allies and his enemies alike.
Section 6. Richard the Lionheart. But of course, the story doesn't just end with taking the city. Coming all the way from across the world, England's greatest warrior, Richard the Lionheart, arrived on the scene to challenge Saladin's newly established control. And what followed was honestly one of history's most fascinating rivalries. It was this intense, grinding, psychological, and strategic chess match between two absolute military titans. They fought bitterly, sure, yet they maintained this strange, almost unspoken mutual respect for one another. But despite his immense power and tactical brilliance, Richard just couldn't break Saladin's strategic hold on the region. Ultimately, Richard was forced to concede the ultimate prize and retreat, forever cementing Saladin's legacy as a brilliant tactician who could outmaneuver even Europe's most famous, battle-hardened warrior king. So, I want to leave you with this final thought. On one hand, you have Saladin laying these ruthless, flawlessly executed military traps that decimated entire armies. On the other hand, he showed unprecedented diplomatic mercy and restraint at the absolute height of his triumph. How does this unique duality, the fierce warrior and the merciful diplomat, reshape how we view medieval warfare today? Characters like this, who completely defy the brutal conventions of their era, are incredibly rare, aren't they? I really hope this analysis gave you a whole new perspective on such a legendary figure. Keep questioning, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.